Hi guys, welcome to the channel. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your continued support. Right, today is bank checks. Yes, the old fraud bill which the government are trying to put through. They are currently looking at this. It's currently going through Parliament and it's all being discussed and things like this. Basically, if you haven't heard about it, which I'm sure you have, it's the government's way of trying to get back some of the money that's taken from benefits by fraud, even though fraud is very small. But they are thinking of ways to do it, and one of the ways they want to do it is by allowing banks to access bank accounts of people who are on benefits, and by checking to see, well, part of it's supposed to be a validation check to see if they've got savings that's over the limit. The second part is that if they have someone who they believe is a victim, committing fraud, then they then have the ability to go into the bank account to check that. They can go in and check to see if they've got enough money to pay it back, and if they do, they also have the power to go and take it directly from the bank account. Now, this has caused a little bit of upset amongst the Labour MPs. One in particular has put forward a motion to adjust this bill in certain ways. So let's take a look at it now, and I'll show you what the adjustments he thinks is necessary. Let's take a look. Okay, so this is it. Starmer faces Labour revolt over plan to raid bank accounts of benefit claimants. So, in essence, Keir Starmer is facing rebellion over his plan to use direct deductions from people's bank accounts and the cancellation of driving licences as part of the government's crackdown on welfare fraud and overclaiming. This is an attempt to claw back the annual $9.7 billion, apparently, in overpaid benefits made by the Department of Work and Pensions due to fraud and error. Error, I think, is probably bigger than fraud on this. The government has adopted conservative plans for debt recovery, and this is the fraud, error and recovery bill would give DWP the power to require banks to provide data to help identify when an applicant is not meeting the eligibility criteria for a benefit for which they have applied. The bill would allow the government to demand bank statements to identify debtors who have sufficient funds to repay what they owe through fraud or error in a claim. The DWP would then have the power to recover money directly from bank accounts for those not on benefits or in the PAYE employment system who are identified as having means to pay. Those who repeatedly fail to repay could fall suspended DWP disqualification order, which would disqualify them from holding a driving licence. So Liz Kendall has said that this is necessary because the system is broken. However, amendments tabled by the Labour MP for Poole, Neil Duncan Jordan, that would force the government to drop key strands of the bill are supported by a growing number of MPs in Starmer's party. The amendments, backed by 17 Labour MPs, would ensure that only those suspected of fraud rather than the victim of an error were subjected to surveillance, allowing the government to target criminality without monitoring the public, Ian Jordan has said. The Labour MP also proposed to remove the power to apply to a court to strip people of their driving licences due to debt, describing the policy as a poverty penalty, which it is. Writing in The Guardian, Duncan Jordan, who was elected for the first time in 2024, accused Starmer's government of resurrecting Tory proposals for mass spying on people who receive state support. He said legislation would compel banks to carry out financial surveillance of welfare recipients, adding that given the volume of accounts involved, this would be completed by an algorithm. If the software flags a possible overpayment, whether due to fraud or error, the bank will report the individual to the Department for Work and Pensions for further investigation. By default, welfare recipients will be treated as suspects simply because they need support from the state. He adds that the government should learn from the post office scandal, in which a faulty computer system led to hundreds of people being falsely accused of fraud and error. He said the risk of a Horizon-style scandal on a massive scale is glaringly obvious, where millions are being monitored. It would be disabled people, carers, pensioners and the very poorest people who are impacted by wrongful investigations and forced to endure burdensome appeals to prove their innocence. Kendall has said the use of direct deduction orders allowing the recovery of funds would save the taxpayer $500 million a year once fully rolled out. In the 23-24 financial year, the DWP estimates that the benefit overpayments due to fraud or error by claimants totalled £9.7 billion. The banking industry, of course, has raised concerns that it will be forced to hand over account information of claimants in cases where there are indications that there may have been paid benefits incorrectly. And this article does go on. Of course, I will leave a link to it in the description to the video. But essentially, I think this is probably more error than fraud. Fraud is quite small, and I think this is probably more DWP error. And I don't believe that if the DWP have made an error, that it should be clawed back in such a inhumane way. I mean, I think that obviously they want to make sure that error is as low as possible, but I think by doing this, by doing it in this way, you're treating the person receiving it as a criminal when actually they may not even know that there was an error. So they may be receiving this money believing that they're entitled to it, and they're actually not, or something has happened to cause an error in the system. And I think that it's wrong that they are then hounded in this way. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, whether you think that the changes he's proposing are good enough and wide enough to be effective. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Please do subscribe if you've got this far. It really does help to push the channel onwards. And thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.